is more than one way for a presidential candidate to be both for and against the war in Iraq. And in our third story in the countdown tonight, Senator John McCain may have settled on the most cynical one yet, choosing as his villain as the quintessential representative of all that is wrong with the war, not the current commander-in-chief, but rather a man no longer in office, the former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. Campaigning in South Carolina, Mr. McCain continued to express strong support for President Bush's troop escalation, but of the former Secretary of Defense, he said, quote, "We are paying a very heavy price for the mismanagement," that's the kindest word I can give you, "of Donald Rumsfeld of this war. I think Donald Rumsfeld will go down in history as one of the worst Secretaries of Defense in history." Indeed, as far back as December of 2004, the senator said he had no confidence in Mr. Rumsfeld, though when Rumsfeld resigned last November, Senator McCain managed some kind words in a statement, quoting, "While Secretary Rumsfeld and I have had our differences, he deserves Americans' respect and gratitude for his many years of public service." But McCain's other stances on the war are not so easily finessed. A little more than 2 weeks ago, he managed to say within the span of 1 minute that judging the troop escalation would be possible in a few months' time, but it would not be possible in a few months' time.
It took us a long time to get in the situation we're in, and to say that and somehow assume that in a few months that things are going to get all better, I think is not realistic.
Say it's all in. How long are you going to give it to work?
I think in the case of the Iraqi government cooperating and doing what's necessary, we can know fairly well in a few months.
Senator McCain's emphasis on the word government notwithstanding, he may want to review his pronouncements about the war. In an interview with website Politico last month, McCain said that if the escalation doesn't work, one option to consider would be, quote, "to withdraw to the borders of Iraq to try to keep other countries from interfering, maintaining our bases in Kuwait and other places. There are lots of scenarios." But less than a week later, when asked if there were any scenarios under which withdrawing troops would be acceptable, the senator said, quote, "Not until we have the situation under control to the degree that the Iraqi government can exert its influence through most of the country." A reminder, too, that Senator McCain said in 2002 and early 2003 that the war in Iraq would be won easily. But early January of this year, he said he knew all along that the war would, quote, "probably be long and hard and tough." Let's turn to Newsweek's senior editor and MSNBC political analyst, Jonathan Alter. John, good evening.
Hi, Keith.
Since well before the midterms, it sure looked like Senator McCain was trying to reposition himself far to the right. But does this latest stuff go a little further than that? Is he now looking less like a self-redefining senator and a little bit more like a forgetful old man?
Well, I don't know if I go that far, but I think he's a maverick who's trapped in a straitjacket of his own making. You know, he really wants to give rein to who he is, which is a guy who does not like President Bush very much. That's been clear since 2000. And wanted a much heavier footprint in Iraq. He really, from the start, wanted a lot more troops. But instead of, criticizing the policy all along, he would occasionally take little jabs at it. And because of his political ambitions, couldn't engage in full-throated opposition to the policy.
Clearly, that creates a position where he's on a tightrope, maybe on a bicycle on a tightrope, maybe on a unicycle on a tightrope. You support the president, you support the escalation, but you just damn the president's top military strategist, the guy who's executing the war for him, and you seem to try to preserve room to say later, hey, I would have ordered a greater escalation. Is there a point at which he can no longer hold on to almost contradictory positions? Is there a tipping point, an event that occurs that knocks him off that tightrope?
Well, I think you have to distinguish between, his maverick credentials for the general public, which are in rough shape right now, and where he stands within the Republican Party, where there's still a lot of support for this war. Chuck Hagel, who used to be a good friend of John McCain's, has been saying that because McCain was a naval aviator and he wasn't really involved in ground combat in Vietnam, he doesn't really understand what this quagmire is all about. So I think some of his lack of understanding of the whole situation, even though he's steeped in military policy-making history, is hobbling him now. He really doesn't have a good handle on the whole thing, and that's clear from all these